All right, welcome to our third lesson for chapter 12. We are still talking about land use planning. This is just land use planning kind of in general after our introductions. Learning goal or learning objective here is that you will be able to describe the basic principles of land use planning. So, taking a look at what land use planning is. So land use planning is a process of evaluating the needs and wants of a population, the land characteristics and value, and the various alternative solutions to land use before changes are made. So it's putting thought into what's the best use of this land, what do we need, what are all of the different options, and then choosing what actually fits all of those needs the best. Many problems that were outlined in the previous lessons can be avoided if we use proper land use planning. We look ahead and plan what we need. A basic rule should be to make as few changes as possible. When changes are needed, we should evaluate and record unique geological, geographic, and biological features. So looking at what the Earth is offering in that space naturally, what it looks like, what it's shaped like, what the soil is like, all of those things that are already there. We should preserve any unique cultural or historical features, and those could be structures already built by previous humans. Those could be natural features that were just naturally there, but those things should be preserved. We should try to conserve open space and environmental features. We should also recognize and calculate the cost of additional changes required to accommodate altered land use. So not just say, okay, this is space that we don't think we're currently using well, so let's just make all the changes. Planning out those changes, planning out how much it's going to cost, planning out how much is going to change is really important with proper land use planning. The other land use planning principles are that we should always plan for mixed use in close proximity. So what that means is within close proximity, let's call it walking distance of wherever someone is living. We should have all of the essentials. We should have somewhere to go eat. We should have somewhere to go get food, like groceries. We should have healthcare. We should have an open space. We should have a park. We should have all of these things within close proximity to each other so that we aren't relying so much on cars and roads and things like that. We should also plan for a variety of transportation options. So yes, we should have roads for cars, but also what about public transportation? What about trains? What about buses? All of those. What about walking? What about biking? Good land use planning incorporates all of those variety of transportations into the plan. Set limits and require managed growth patterns with compact development. So planning ahead, making sure that we are not just constantly growing up and out, but setting limits on that so that we aren't going crazy. And encourage development in areas with existing infrastructure. So instead of just looking, okay, there's an empty, like acres and acres of empty field, let's develop there. Looking at places where there already are people living, there's already a bus system, there's already things happening, and see what we can do to develop in that already created space. So these are some townhomes, Victorian townhomes that are really famous in San Francisco. So that would be an example of protecting historic and cultural resources. Parks would be protecting open space. This is for diverse transportation, so pedestrians, so walking and biking. And then this is developing where there's already development. So reuse abandoned urban spaces instead of just leaving that building abandoned and empty. Let's repurpose it if it's possible. So there's different mechanisms for implementing land use plans. So we could establish state and regional planning agencies. This is more effective than local small agencies because political boundaries don't always reflect geological and biological boundaries or databases used in planning. So the bigger the agency is in planning, the more space that they kind of have control over. Good and a bad thing. A regional approach is more likely to prevent duplication of facilities and lead to greater efficiency. So we can share resources. We can also restrict use. So zoning is something that's used really, really frequently. And that's like land use regulation that restricts the use to which land in a region can be put. This can be good. This can be bad. But it basically says this area is only used for commercial. This area is only used for residential. So a lot of the time, the reason that that can be bad is because planners usually make zoning decisions that represent business or developing interests, not necessarily the most sustainable choice moving forward. So let's look at some examples of state land use planning legislation. So we have them in California, Florida, Georgia, Hawaii, pretty much every state is going to have something. But one example is the California Coastal Act. And this says that it defines the coastal zone as 3 miles out to sea or 1,000 yards inland. And in order to develop there, you have to have a permit, a special permit from the California Coastal Commission. You can't just develop there because you own the land. So that's one example, and then you can pause to read the others. And then local growth management actions. One of the actions could be limiting building permits. So that could limit the amount of building permits to like 500, to limit how many buildings we have in specific areas. This is really common in some towns that they want to stay kind of towns and not big cities. So Livermore, California, Boulder, Colorado, places like that. All right, you can pause to read the rest of those there. That is the end of this lesson. Please let me know if you have any questions, and I will see you in the next one.